So I guess let's start with a bit about you. What's your background and how did you first come to your art form?
So, my name is Rana Huwais. I am a multidisciplinary artist working out of Chicago currently. I graduated from Albion College with a BFA in printmaking, actually, which is why it's interesting now that primarily I make ceramics. And that's because I'm working out of a ceramic studio called The Digs in West Town now. So that like sort of has started to influence how I start to think about my mediums. And I've always been very much conceptually driven in my work, and I very much think hard about how the concept is going to relate to the mediums I use and like how I can also manipulate the material and the mediums to then inform the idea. And yeah, I mean, I have started to really come to love ceramics because it is obviously like so tactile and it's close to the heart in a way that is like very pleasing to me, and it has a soul to itself. Like they always say that like clay has memory in a way that's like very scary to me. Like that frightens me a lot because I constantly make mistakes, and so like that stays. It's alive. It stays alive with you, and it forms with you, and it changes alongside you. And so I think that works really well with the ideas that I create. And so I start to think of all the pieces that I make as alive, my army of children, I guess. But
I love that, your little army of children.
oh,
So when you're making your army of children, is there anything in particular you're drawn to creating within the pottery, like different imagery that keeps getting represented?
yeah, I am very actually obsessed with symbolism and imagery, and very specifically like how I've started to use them as a sort of mythologized separate language, as a sort of like code that you would have to kind of figure out in order to get to the very meat and the heart of the idea. And that has been an idea that I've worked with for a very long time, actually. And it used to be in my print work a lot. I would use the coexistence of those visual motifs and also the language of Arabic as like, because there were very little Arabic speakers around me besides the people in my house. And so that became like a way that I could, have those very vulnerable thoughts and feelings and express that in a way that was still codified, if that is a word, but it is to me. And so that kind of, it became a language that, like, obviously I would use every day in my home, but then also in my art, it became a way that it would express the ideas that were close to my heart again. And it became a vulnerable version of the way that I wanted to speak. And it became like that code. And it was the sort of veil that I would put on the ideas that I was wanting to express, but still a little bit too scared to. And when we talk about sort of visual motif, I consider those as like, I guess you would say, keys into that very similar world. Like in my work, I love using emblems that you would find in like Syrian taules, they're called. So like game tables. It's like what is it called? The word is escaping me. It's like shell inlays of like wood. And so like you'll see all these like really expert artisans, and they do these like tiny, really intricate details. And like I really am inspired by the shapes that they create. And obviously in Damascene architecture and Arabic art, it's all very geometry based and very shape based. And those shapes are not only just serene, but they kind of tell you stories in a way that's like very tranquil and lovely. And I have very much tried to use those in my work, and then updating them in a way that's like more personal to me and more whimsical. And an example of that is in the piece is like a bird, like a giant bird on the side. I love birds. I have my entire life. And so yeah, it's a mix of those two.
Yeah. So, thinking about the piece that you're exhibiting, it is that ceramic piece. It's titled "What Do You Need?" That's the English translation. So, can you walk us through that work that you're showcasing as part of Acts of Care? What was the story or the concept behind this work?
Yeah, and so for that piece, it was a lot of the similar idea where it was that codified sort of vulnerable language through motif and also Arabic language, and specifically very tender language, ones that you would use with like a young person or like a baby and a loved one, because it was important to me that Arabic is seen as something that is tender and is very poetic and beautiful, and that is how I've experienced it in my life. And it's not, seen that way in popular culture, but that is how I've experienced it in my life, is a way of tenderness and care and a lot of humor. And so that's how I've always used it in those pieces, and to use those motifs and cover it in almost like this tattooed style of like around the vessel and have it be like, it's like almost that every little drawing is like a new tattoo for the piece of like a memory that it has and a moment that it remembers with all these different motifs and things. And I wanted to create a vessel because obviously a vessel is something that holds, and there is that like, that flower motif in the side where it is cut out because I wanted it to be able to like breathe and be able to see into it, and also that like, visual difference in texture and things. And yeah, I I want to make a lot more actually. Now that I've made the one, I'm like addicted now, and that is the plan. I'm gonna make many, many more of them. So
Wow, that's so I guess I'll just ask, what is your artistic process? You're making these now, you're gonna make more. Walk us through that process.
okay. It was a lot of fun actually because it was very, very unexpected. So I had first like thrown the pot because I had not thrown in embarrassingly like almost 4 years, and it was not good. It was not that long. It just felt like that long. And so I was throwing like I think it was like 10 pounds of clay, and it got like really off center, and it was like really bad. And I was like, oh God, what am I gonna do with this now? What do I want to reclaim it, or like should I just do something with it? And so then I just started to like carve it with a tool, trying to like figure out if it was gonna get any more on center. And I was like, you know what? Let's play with this even more and just like fully go off the edge. And then I tried to just like draw on it, and then like I have like I had this like piece of plastic, and then I drew like on Sharpie, and I just doodled all over it. And then I went back, and when it was leather hard, I carved back into it. It was a lot of repetition, which is very interesting because that's also something that I'm very into, because it's almost like a devotional act to keep continuing to do this over and over and over. And so then you start to memorize like where the pen goes, where the carving tool goes. It's like it's part of the process to sort of memorize that. And then you end up having this, thing covered in lines. And then I just started to carve out that like flower part. I think that was the last bit. And yeah, it's cold surfaced because the clay did not behave and did not oxidize properly. And so I wanted it to be a darker brown. And so I went back and stained it. But in the future, I think I'm gonna play around with different oxides and iron contents and all that sort of fun chemistry stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like your work is continuing obviously to change and evolve. How would you say in like from when you first started out, like, how has it changed or evolved? And then what influences those shifts in your work?
Mhm. I think currently the biggest shift I have is going from something that was much more structured of like a school environment where like everything was kind of provided to me, and now it's all up here and the ideas have to come from here. And so then the ideas come kind of insulatory, like they come sort of like, I don't know, like it's hard to then branch out into something bigger, and that has to be like that intentional choice where you sit down and then start to really dig deeper into what should I do in order to grow? Because you can't keep using the same ideas forever. Then it just becomes kind of sterile. And so the way that I've started to approach it is using those same core ideas of working with motif and language as a sort of code, and using memory, nostalgia, and all those things, but then sort of experimenting with different mediums, like right now with ceramics, experimenting more with that, and just trying to branch out. Like the next thing I want to do is I really want to do wood because I hate woodworking. I hate it. And I really need to like, I gotta master that. So yeah, it's just sort of challenging myself with different roads to get to that ending of like the conceptual idea.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you pick a medium and then you really work with it for a bit. Work
Gotta
through it.
commit.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you do. You do have to commit. It's a hard medium woodworking. I'll be honest with you, only because I
I mean,
my dad's a woodworker, so like I grew up with it, but it is definitely that is a challenging medium.
like all the tiny measurements, like that was the worst part of printmaking for me, was like cutting down paper and measuring and measure twice, cut once. And like I can't I'm so bad at it, and I need to get better at that. But yeah, that's like the next challenge, is like the ultimate one is wood. But
Well, once you like slip into the flow of what like of the wooden process, like you'll get it. It just it
okay.
It's like it'll take a second, but then once you get it, you'll be like, oh wait, this is okay. And you'll it's actually, I'll be honest, it's a lot of the repetition that you're talking about already.
Okay,
Like
good.
you'll
Good.
start whittling and then you'll start like seeing it, and depending on which kind of avenue in woodworking you take,
Right.
you'll pick it up. I From what it sounds like, it's very similar, very tactile, like
Mhm.
pottery is. So, um, anyways, back to the questions. So yeah, so now you're exhibiting at Woman Made Gallery as a part of this Acts of Care exhibition. I mean, what does it mean for you as, especially as a young artist, to be able to show your work here in this woman and non-binary centered space?
I'm so happy and so honored to do so because I think I mean, the entire space is just so like tender in a way that like is very inspiring to me. And so to see the other artists and the way that they've set up the exhibitions and all their like past shows and everything, I'm very into it. I'm very into a lot of the ideas that they're working with, especially in the ways that it contends to care and memory and sort of the devotion behind that and sort of like the invisible labor and things. Those are all ideas that I'm very interested in. And so to be exhibited here is like really, really cool. I feel very good about myself. But yeah, I'm very honored. I'm very excited. And yeah, we're doing good.
Yeah, I mean, and so now with the exhibition opening, you know, people are going to get to see your work in this space. What do you hope when people approach your work? They see it. You're not always going to be next to it. What do you hope that they, feel, think, notice when they see it as a part of this exhibition?
I hope that they see it and they keep looking at it, and I hope that they keep trying to decode it. I suppose. I hope they keep looking at it and seeing all these symbols and forms. And I hope that even if they don't know exactly what it means or what the language says, that they'll get the general idea of that warmth and that care. And if they do speak Arabic, then it'll be just like a I see you kind of moment. And I think that's very special also. And so yeah, it's just more about, gaining that relationship and sort of being able to express care in a way that's like very, you know, just written on the surface of it, literally. So,
Yeah. No, that's amazing. So, well, I'll ask, while you're making this piece, there's probably a sense of catharsis. You talked about repetition and everything, and now people are just gonna see this end product. They're not gonna see, all of these little moments that went into it. So, is there something that maybe people won't see necessarily right off the bat in that final version when they're looking at it, but that you know about because you did the work behind the process, something whether it's technical or otherwise?
that's a good question. Um, I think weirdly it would be how unsure I was the whole time making it. I think it was because it was such like an impromptu process and how it started and how it got there eventually. And I think that lends a lot to the actual idea itself because obviously vulnerability and care is not, a linear cycle. It's something that takes a while and takes a lot of devotion. But yeah, I think the struggle at the start was not exactly, that won't show up. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. People won't see all the hours that went into it and won't see, how you're not always 100% certain how it's going to turn out because it's art, that takes on a kind of a life of its own. I feel like most art does. And then I guess just you've touched on it already, but where are you going next for people who are watching, what's next for you?
I think I'm just gonna kind of crack down and keep making some work. I have a lot of ideas that like have been floating around in my head for a really long time, and I think I need to actually now sit down and stop thinking about it so much and really just start doing it. And part of that is making more of pieces like this, and part of it is, yeah, just like kind of stop to think about it so much and just start to actually use my hands and start to doing it because I think that's also a very important part of that process. But yeah, I'll just keep working out of the digs and having a great time there. And yeah, I think I'm gonna be stuck with Clay for a while. I really love her. So yeah.